Welcome to Called Voices in STEM, the podcast that highlights the experiences, challenges, and career stories of women in STEM. Join us as we explore the stories of these inspiring women and learn more about the diverse contributions they are making to the world of science. Here is your host, Dr. Chloe Lim.
Hi everyone, this is Dr. Chloe Lim, and you're listening to Called Voices in STEM, a podcast that highlights the experience, challenges, and career stories of culturally and linguistically diverse women in STEM. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land throughout Australia and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge the deep contribution that they make to the life of our city and our region. In this episode of the Called Voices in STEM podcast, I'm very excited and honored to have Dr. Celia Torres-Villanueva with me today as our podcast guest. Dr. Celia graduated cum laude with honors with a Bachelor of Science in Molecular Biology and Biotechnology from the University of the Philippines, completed her PhD in Biomedical Science at the University of Massachusetts Medical School, and then set up a research lab working on DNA vaccines in the Philippines. Celia then became a lawyer, admitted to practice both in the Philippines and Australia. She volunteers as a refugee lawyer and board director, has mentored many girls and women in their career development, and is a proud mother of a son and two daughters, all of whom are in STEM careers. Welcome, Celia, to our podcast.
Oh, thank you so much, Chloe, for having me here. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. I can see that you have quite a diverse career pathway. You've done some research and then you've done lawyering, I guess, if you call it. So can you share a little bit more about your background and how did you become interested in STEM?
Sure, yeah. So, growing up in the Philippines, STEM was, something that wasn't necessarily kept away from girls. I had that privilege where, girls weren't necessarily shut out from thinking about STEM, unlike in other countries. So when I was growing up, there was almost not even an expectation, but really sort of an aspiration, even from my parents, that my older sister and I would go into the Philippine Science High School, which is a scholarship-based specialist science high school in the Philippines. And we did both get through that, as well as my brother, actually. But yeah, so I started out there and it was very, very intensive. We had very intensive science subjects. So that really drilled into me very early on, the love of science, of research, and of the scientific method. But even then, though, I really was thinking about law at the same time. So when I entered into university, I first enrolled as a Bachelor of Science majoring in economics, because I wanted that to go into law. But then I would see all my high school classmates in their lab coats doing all their research in chemistry and math and physics. I'm like, I miss that so much. And just to confess my age in a way, molecular biology and biotechnology was just starting out as a course in the Philippines. So there was, so I missed the entry to the first class, to the first cohort to complete that batch. But then I went to the second cohort. And so I moved from economics to Bachelor of Science, Molecular Biology and Biotechnology. And it was that, the love of science just pervading back. And also I saw this very old movie now. I don't think anybody will know it. The Double Helix, about James Watson and Francis Crick, based on the book, The Double Helix, by I think James Watson. So, that time molecular biology was still very new in the Philippines as a discipline, as an area. So I went to that, and then after I finished, I was at that crossroad again. Should I now go into law, or should I keep pursuing the sciences? And I applied for a PhD studies in the US. And when that came through, I said, I think I'll go for a PhD first. So I did that at the University of Massachusetts, and it was really great. I don't regret a single moment of having been a scientist. An amazing time of my life.
Oh, fantastic. So then how did you get into lawyering, I guess, of becoming a lawyer?
That's the part two, isn't it?
Yes, that's part two.
The previous life, previous incarnation was as a scientist. So again, it's always both, right? I've always had both in my mind, being a scientist and being a lawyer. So after I finished my PhD, I had my son in the US. My husband was there. We moved back to the Philippines with our infant son. And then I set up my research lab, had two more daughters. But all this time I was thinking, maybe I should go into law now. I mean, I'm not getting any younger. And if I do want to become a lawyer, I don't want to become a lawyer when it's too late to really do anything. So while I was doing that, raising these three kids, I went into evening law school at the University of the Philippines. And things really opened up for me then. I became associate dean of the College of Science because the dean at that time wanted someone who had a bit of a legal mind, but still in the College of Science. And then I eventually became vice chancellor for research and development, again, because the chancellor at that time, the university, was thinking, you know what, I need someone who's both a scientist and who can think of IP, intellectual property and policy making and the legal side of it. So I think this all fell into place, that my two interests really helped me get, advance my career.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. And I think it's in a way, you've got that passion for being a lawyer, and it never really died away, did it? Like, it still says, I think there's a bit of that lawyer in you still. And now you've got that opportunity to practice as a lawyer. So do you still use some of your scientific skills or mindset in your lawyer practice?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, for a long time when I first became a lawyer, really, and I think that's a natural organic pathway, is for a lawyer who has a science background to go into intellectual property law. So, I spent the first few years of my career really in IP. When I was in the Philippines, I was with the Intellectual Property Office. I was a consultant of the government to draft the technology transfer bill, which eventually became an act. So I helped, I also sat in the House of Representatives working group. And then when I came here to Australia, I started in the research contracts and research commercial management areas as well. And the universities, and two universities, and the CSIRO. So it's definitely all that science, an understanding of how these scientists, engineers, and mathematicians talked and thought, what were their drivers, what motivated them, and how then do we translate that into the contract? What can we have in the contract to make sure that their motivations are protected? We're recognizing why they want to do this contract with, let's say, a grant. But at the same time, coming from the legal side and the commercial side, what does the organization want to protect and want to do? So, yeah, definitely.
Oh, wow. That sounds like, so it's challenging stuff, isn't it? Doing legal work, because I'm a regulatory scientist, so I have to deal with legal documents or legal framework, working within the legal framework as well. And when you have to do scientific evaluations against the legal framework, it adds an added layer of complexity. And when you're working in an organization where it's important to protect the IP, like having that really deep understanding and knowledge about legal implications and all the legal jargons, I think it's definitely a very, very handy skill to have. So can you share with us a project or achievement that you're particularly proud of in your STEM career?
Well, definitely my STEM career. I think it's again, I'm going to reveal my age here. It's my PhD supervisor at UMass Medical was actually one of the inventors of DNA vaccines. And when she was working on DNA vaccines, they were still getting laughed at the immunology conferences because nobody would believe that DNA could actually act as an immunogen or create immunogens and initiate an immune response. So they were really, they got a lot of criticism for being cracked, even, and now, of course, look, COVID and all the DNA and mRNA vaccines, it's also mainstream now.
Yes.
So I think I'm really proud that, I got into it when there was still so much speculation about it, so much doubt, skepticism, And then I brought that back to the Philippines and set up my own lab, and really also set up my own animal lab within my lab. So I think that was a particularly challenging aspect in my STEM career, but yeah.
Yeah. So did you get funding from the government to set up your lab, and how did your research lab go? What's happened to it now?
Yeah. So when I first came to the Philippines, so I applied for an early career. I can't remember the name of it. It's almost like an early career grant from the World Health Organization. So it was for developing multi-epitope DNA vaccines against malaria.
Yep.
And then I got some government funding as well for a hog cholera DNA vaccine, for dengue. I got and dengue DNA vaccine. And but when I shifted my career to law, I gave that all up. And I guess my work continues on my students. I hope that my students, still continue some of the work. And but I think that's really a past life for me now.
Yeah. So that work is still ongoing in the Philippines right now, and
not in the exact areas that I worked on now.
Okay.
But I took that on.
Yeah. No, I think that's amazing to be able to start something up that's not present in the country. Because I would imagine that your lab would have been the first lab to look at DNA vaccines, given how new and novel it was at that time when you started it. Yeah. So were there any challenges that you faced in terms of being a culturally diverse woman in STEM?
So I think when I was in the States, maybe I wasn't conscious of it, but there were definitely challenges. For example, in the lab at UMass where I was at, I was the only PhD student working there who was culturally and linguistically diverse. So there's one other postdoc who was, and he was male. So, we have that intersectionality, right? We're both women and women of color. So there's that sort of double whammy of intersectionality. So I faced some challenges while I was in that lab, which I don't know was primarily because I was culturally and linguistically diverse. But yeah, I guess there was some, how would I say it? Almost some hesitation among some of my lab mates in terms of interacting with me. There was some, I can't even find a word, but not, I wouldn't say suspicion that they were necessarily suspicious of me, but there was this inability for me to connect with them. So I was more able to connect actually with the postdocs, with the technicians, with the research assistants. But with my fellow PhD students, there was this sort of like a bit of a disconnect. But that, I think I was very fortunate that it didn't really face huge challenges as a woman in STEM.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. I'm wondering, sometimes, because you're saying that you didn't have any issues with postdocs or the research assistants. I don't know. Is it quite competitive in the US in terms of PhDs? And perhaps that was really the main reason why things were a little bit disconnected for you between you and your other PhD fellow students.
Yeah, it was extremely competitive, and very few PhDs in the US actually stay in research. They end up, I think a lot of my good friends from the US end up one of being a yoga instructor, another was, they end up in very different fields, and so it was extremely competitive, I think. But now that we're talking about it, I did realize, because I started out my PhD first at the University of Texas at Austin, and students there were much more diverse, and I didn't feel that same disconnect until I went to Massachusetts, where I was in a primarily non-college lab. So maybe there is that connection. But I think the competitiveness was definitely because how women especially tend to be very hardworking. I didn't have any family there other than my husband, so I had nothing to do but focus on the lab and be there 18 hours a day.
Yeah, I think it can be challenging. I guess different universities will probably have different cultures in terms of how hard or how long they work in the lab. And, different people have different perceptions of what then it means for them if they see someone else who's working so hard and they may not be spending as much time as the other person. So,
and fair enough, right? Because they have family, they have things to do on the weekend, at night, whereas I didn't do that.
Different people, different circumstances. So but it's great that regardless of how you felt, you still went through and did the work that you needed to do to get your PhD.
And so I credit I credit my PhD supervisor. She was just 110% so supportive. That was really good.
Yeah, I think when it comes to finding a PhD supervisor, doing a PhD, finding the right PhD supervisor really, I think, accounts for most of your PhD success. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So do you think there's anything that needs to be changed in terms of the STEM industry so that we can create more opportunities for culturally diverse women?
Yeah, that's a $1 billion question, isn't it? There's just so much that needs to be done. And when I think about it, and again, it's that called women in STEM intersectionality. Like, there's a lot of good work being done to increase opportunities for women, but then the called women, like even in the US, like the Black and Hispanic women, are still very much disadvantaged compared to their non-Black compared to the white women. So how do you then address all that to increase opportunities? I think what I've seen here in not so much in the university setting. I think I'm not sure what still needs to be done in the setting, but in the industrial setting, the corporate setting, like I've worked in engineering, big engineering companies and big technology companies, is that it's really hard to recruit women in the first place. And then to retain them is the next hurdle. And then the next challenge is to promote them. So I think the entire cycle of that has to be really looked at and completely overhauled. So, for example, in one of my previous jobs, my boss my director boss is a woman, and she was very conscious about framing even the job descriptions and the ad to be very gender neutral. Because there's been a lot of research where, say something like essential skill or required, is that some women will say, well, they need to meet the 10 essential skills or they won't apply, whereas a man will meet 4 of that and will apply anyway. So, it's just a lot of the wording, like very aggressive or very wording that will tend to potentially put off some women, has to be thought about, like how you word that job ad. And then, okay, so you've written the job ad, now they're coming in and applying. Then the interview stage, right? So it's very important to have a woman on the interview panel. Like how many women have come into an interview and they're faced by 3 men, right? So it's very, and if you have diversity, have a colored woman who can come in, even better. Like ideally, you should have a colored woman or at least a woman and a colored man in the panel. Okay, they've done the interview, they're now in the company, you've hired them. What comes next? Well, a lot of women and colored women leave. They don't stay. So why? And in one of the companies I've worked in, it turns out that a lot of them were getting bullied, getting harassed because they're still in very male-dominated engineering jobs. But they wouldn't report this. They never told their manager, they don't report it to HR, and you only find out about it during the exit interview. So what is happening there, right? So it's a huge cultural shift. You have to make sure that once they've been hired, you're actually monitoring these colored women and not getting bullied or sexually harassed or racially undergoing any racial discrimination. And then, okay, so fine, now you've retained them. What happens next? They're not getting promoted. So if they're not getting promoted, they leave as well because it's much easier to get promoted to go to a new job. And I can attest to that. So, it's really leadership development and professional development, because the last thing you want to do is to promote a colored woman just because she's a colored woman and they're right? Because it's a disservice to all other colored women. Because once you do that and you're setting her up to fail, and then everyone will say, oh, that's because she's a colored woman and she shouldn't really have gotten that job in the first place. But it's really developing them while they're in the job, preparing them, giving them the right skills, the right tools, so that once it's promotion time, they're ready to be promoted, they're empowered, they're prepared, and you're not preparing them to fail, not setting them up to fail. Overhauling that entire recruitment cycle is really something that we'll need to look at. And it's not the recruitment cycle, but the culture of the organization. Because as long as the organization is not receptive to having called women, I don't know, on the factory floor, in the engineering labs, or in the research labs, then it's not going to work. It has to be a holistic solution.
So do you see a lot of the organizations and industries starting to adapt this sort of process to encourage cultural diversity and also inclusivity in their organization?
Unfortunately, no, not a lot. There will be some, and where I'm working now is very, very good at it. Absolutely amazing. But a lot of the previous companies I've worked in, they know it at a level, like they will say it, it's in the policies, it's in all the materials that are going out, but in practice, it's not working. It's just not happening. In one of the companies I worked in, less than 10% of the workforce were women. And of that 10%, how many were called? I haven't counted, but really, really bad. So I think a lot of organizations know it intellectually, but they're not really practicing it or not being able to put it into operation, getting the outcomes that they might want.
Yeah. So what do you think could be stopping them from doing that? What's that barrier that they're facing that stops them to put that into practice?
I think it's the lack of a holistic view. That's one. Also, in the various organizations I've worked in, I always make a comment when they're talking about their KPIs and strategic plans. because they're not really putting ambitious KPIs or aspirational KPIs. Like, by 2025, by 2030, we'll have 50-50 women or this number of diversity and cultural diversity. But I think organizations be very conservative about it. Whereas, if you're not going to set up an aspirational, even 10-year KPI, how are you ever going to meet it if you're just aspiring for 30% or 20% in 5 years? That's not enough. So, and until you have that target that you're being measured against every year, like how are you tracking against your 5-year plan? And there isn't going to be much of an incentive. I think it's really important for there to be a clear aspiration and goal. And for those public companies, that the shareholders can test the CEO and the board, well, how have you performed against your KPIs that you wanted to be 30% cultural diverse and 50% women?
Yeah, it sounds like they need some level of accountability, isn't it? So you have that measures, you have those aspirations, but then unless someone is checking in on you to make sure that you are meeting those aspirational KPIs, then people are more likely to just let it slide and forget about things.
Exactly.
Yeah, and just accept the status quo.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering that the organizations I've seen that have been the most successful on this are not the public companies. So you would think that the public companies that are being looked at by the shareholders and investors and have to report their annual reports publicly should be held more to account. And I'm not seeing that yet in terms of diversity. So there's a lot of work to be done there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you can see, like, from what you just said, there's all these challenges, this overhaul required. But for a personal, like at an individual level, then what would be your advice that you would give to culturally diverse women who are pursuing a career in STEM?
Well, I think really back yourself, right? Believe in yourself. I mean, I know there's a lot of talk about imposter syndrome. It's really important. You got here, you have your PhD, you've done the hard yards, you deserve to be here, you deserve that job. And when you're there I think mentoring is very important. I have mentors and I've mentored others. And I feel like it's really a good way to understand the workplace better, to avoid pitfalls that others have already gone through. You can learn from their mistakes and you can learn from their successes. But it's important to develop allies once you're in an organization. So you have your mentors, you have your allies, and then be visible about it. Pay it forward as well. So once you achieve a certain level of leadership or a certain rank, make sure you bring others up and along with you in the journey. And I'm not saying play favorites, someone call women, promote them first, or assign them the nicer assignments and tasks, but just help them out navigate the difficulties of being a college woman in STEM, and that will already go a long way.
Yeah, we do. I think a previous episode of the Cal Women in STEM, Kin also shared a lot about having Kin Ka, who is one of the co-founders for Phoenix Sisters, and she's also an IT specialist as well. And she also talked about how important it is to have allies and sponsors, just people who are at a higher level in a leadership position who can raise you up to where they are or beyond, really. And I don't think people realize that we do need those connections, and we have to keep building that network of people that can help us and support us. And then we also help others who are in need of that support too. So like you say, you are being mentored, but you are also a mentor as well.
That's right.
And and I think that is so important. I mean, I didn't grow up with a mentor when I was back in Malaysia. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't know what to do. but coming to Australia, even I had to learn that I needed mentors, but I didn't know how to make full use of the mentors that I had. I didn't know how to pursue that mentorship relationship. And so I think that's also an important thing for people to learn and understand. Is how do you develop that mentor relationship with others? So maybe if you could share with us a couple of points as to how do you find mentors and how do you build that relationship with a mentor?
Yeah. So I think, and I do want to say, I think as well, I was the same, Chloe. I didn't really have formal mentors, maybe, mentors informally in some way or other. But I think it's also a cultural thing where a lot of us, when we come into a new country like Australia, so we're thinking we need to do this on our own and we can do this on our own, which is, just not the thing, right? You need help, and it's okay to acknowledge that you need help. I think one good tip in finding mentors is I would suggest that you have a mentor in your organization, but it's also good to have a mentor outside your organization. And then you look at your mentors and you think about, and this is advice I got from my mentors, is you look at the people who could be your mentors and you look at what can they mentor you on what you want to achieve. For example, if you're a young mother and you're struggling and you think, how am I going to be able to progress my career and advance my career with 2 little kids at home? And you see a manager or a higher rank who is doing that and is succeeding, then you can get that person as mentor for that part of your career, right? And then you get another mentor who can maybe help you with other aspects of your professional development. I think it's important to have mentors, but also as soon as you can, to start mentoring. Because in the mentoring relationship, you also learn a lot from your mentees. And you develop really good skills in coaching and active listening and advising and just listening to what they're going through and helping them, navigate those challenges that they're having is also very good for you. So I think I would advise call women to get mentors and to start mentoring. And, even when they're mentoring a lot of people, to still be mentored themselves.
Yes.
So,
Oh, fantastic. Those are really great points. I think it's like a, how do you say? I don't know. I feel like it's like a symbiotic, well, not symbiotic relationship, but, but in a way, like when you get something and you give back, you also get that sense of fulfillment and satisfaction as well, that you're helping others too. Well, you're being helped too. So, and you learn so much more when you're teaching or when you're helping others too, I think so.
Yeah. And you realize what you know, right? You discover, oh yeah, I have actually gone through that. And now that I think about it, this is how I did it. And articulating it actually reinforces it as well in your mind. And you know the saying, if you really understand something, that's when you can explain it. Or
that's right.
You understand something if you can explain it.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
It's almost like a journaling, how everyone's being encouraged to start journaling and reflect and self-reflect. Mentoring is like a kind of journaling, but somebody's actually in the receiving end of your self-reflection and learning from it.
No, that's a great point. Actually, I never thought of mentoring as a reflecting journal. It gives you feedback.
That's right, exactly. And you find out if your idea is successful.
That's right. Oh, I love it. That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Celia, for sharing your stories and insights with us today. So today we heard a bit about Celia's journey into STEM and how she moved from being a medical researcher of DNA vaccines, into becoming a lawyer, even after having her 3 children. So anything is possible, mums. And the other thing that, she talked about, we talked about how what we can do to change the industry and how there are a few different points. There's this cycle of how do we recruit? How do we retain? How do we promote cowed women in STEM in organizations so that we can see more of these women standing up in leadership positions? And finally, Celia shared with us about how you need to believe in yourself. In order to succeed, you have to remember all the successes. Don't forget about, you're not being good enough, but because you are good enough, you did the work, the hard work to get there. And so believe in yourself and seek help if you need to. Find mentors, find sponsors, find allies. So thank you so much, Celia, for that. I'd like to I'd like the listeners, if they want to find out a bit more about you, or if they want to connect with you, can you tell us how people can reach out to you?
Sure. You can reach me on LinkedIn. And if you're not on LinkedIn, I have a website called Migrant Women Leaders, and you can contact me there as well.
Oh, fantastic. I have to check out that website. Now, I will also add those information in the show notes as well. So make sure you check her website out and find out more about Celia's work. So thanks again, Celia, for your time today. I really appreciate all the amazing insights and wisdom that you've given us today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much as well, Chloe.
All right. So we've reached the end of our show. So thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others or leave a rating and review. If you have any questions about the things we covered in the show or would like to follow my projects, please find me on Instagram and LinkedIn. Thanks for tuning in today, and I'll see you at the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Called Voices in STEM podcast. Get the show notes, links and resources from today's episode by visiting drchloelim.com.